This is the NAVHC JEDI Podcast. I'm Reginald Austin. To commemorate the nation's 47th official observance of Black History Month, we are taking a look at emerging Black female icons. These include such remarkable people as medical researcher Kizzmekia Corbett, NASA engineer April Erickson Jackson, director, producer, and screenwriter Ava DuVernay, actress and LGBTQ plus advocate Laverne Cox, artist Amy Sherrill, Supreme Court Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson, track and field phenomenon Allison Felix, and NAVHC's own pediatric nurse practitioner Brittany Clark. You can read more about all of these outstanding individuals in this month's JEDI newsletter. In this special edition of the JEDI Podcast, Britney Galicia talks with writer, producer, and lecturer Dr. Sharon D. Johnson. Here is part one of that interview.
Welcome to the Black History Month edition of the JEDI Podcast. I'm Britney Galicia, and today our guest comes to us from the worlds of both academia and the performing arts. Dr. Sharon D. Johnson is a part-time faculty member in the Department of Africana Studies at California State University, Northridge, which is my alma mater, Go Matadors, where she lectures in African American arts and literature. She is also a member of the Writers Guild of America West and chaired the organization's Committee of Black Writers from 1999 to 2003. Dr. Johnson is a script consultant for PBS Masterpiece, and she has been extensively featured on news and information programs on ABC, BET, KCAL, Telemundo, and LA Talk, where she discusses diversity issues. Dr. Sharon Johnson, welcome to the JEDI Podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Me too. So before we begin, we want to know a little bit more about you. Can you tell us about your background? Where did you grow up?
I was born in New York City, lived in Brooklyn and Queens, went to public school, graduated from the mighty Brooklyn Tech High School, went on to Barnard College, and got my bachelor's degree in writing, and then my master's degree in media studies from the New School in 1988.
Oh, nice.
And as I had always sort of known that I wanted to write for the film and television industry. Mm-hmm. Well, I was always writing, and then the particular interest in film and television, developed as I got older, and had the opportunity to move west in 1989, and I've been in Los Angeles since then. And it took me about 4 years before I got my first bona fide writing job and joined the labor union, the Writers Guild of America West. Yeah. I worked for a while as a full-time television writer, and now do script consulting. Have also worked with some companies on developing projects. So I keep it first and foremost in my career, and have branched out to also teach film and television and literature. It's been a great career, great learning process, and just great working with the people that I've gotten to work with.
Yeah, it sounds like you had a very nice path, to get to where you are.
Yes, it was great. I had always been a dreamer. Mm-hmm. I'd been dreaming since before I was in school. I mean, vivid dreams that I still remember to this day.
Wow.
And even as I had begun to teach, I started teaching in the late 90s. I was teaching screenwriting at a large state school here in Los Angeles, teaching in their writers program, which is a general studies program. So it's not matriculated toward a degree.
Okay.
And so the type of student that you get is there's such a wide variety of students that you get. in a class like that. Some who want to do it need the extra training for their career. Some who just like screenwriting. So you have to kind of learn to serve multiple needs.
Yeah.
But the main thing that was consistent, though, is I had always taught screenwriting through what I didn't know was a depth psychological lens at the time, but I had always taught it through this lens that was about the development of the character and also the development of the writer's character as you're going through this process. And started reading books on dream work in the early 90s. And I said, if there were ever a doctoral program in this, I would like to do it. And about 10 years later, a friend of mine handed me this brochure and said, Sharon, I'm thinking about doing this PhD program. What do you think? And when I touched the brochure, I started trembling. And I said, I have been looking for this for decades. I had no idea that my friend was interested in the same field. But yeah, so I felt, number one, doing the program was sort of a personal calling, but also because I teach through that lens, I teach literature and film through this lens of depth psychology. I felt that it would benefit that part of my life as well. So it was something that I was interested in and passionate about and had been studying independently. And it's something that is relevant to my writing and things. So, they're all joined together. They're all connected. And sometimes it's hard for people to figure that out. Like, well, your PhD is in psychology? What is that?
Right.
How are you blending that? And so,
right.
When I have the temperament, I explain to them how it's related. But yeah, so it's, I feel like I have what people would call a full life.
I would say so too.
Life.
I would say so too.
So
yes, that brings us to our next question, which is, in addition to being an accomplished writer, you are also a psychologist. So tell us about that journey and how you ultimately brought the two identities of content creator, writer, teacher, and psychologist together. It's so much a part of just my daily being, this sort of introspective self-evaluation, that no matter what I would be doing professionally or creatively, I would always be doing that. So it's really, for me, even though I've pursued it educationally and incorporated professionally, it's really a personal habit. It's about personal habit. And for people who always ask me, oh, how do I get into, the entertainment industry? And the first thing I always tell them is you need a solid sense of self. Right.
And people are like, what? They're looking for, go to this event or write this and contact this. And, the first thing I would say is you need a solid sense of self, because you will be, if you don't have it, you probably will not survive, or you probably will not be healthy.
Yeah.
And so it's really just a part of who I am. And that's why it is incorporated into everything I do. And to that end, I tend to like to, so for instance, I do a periodic sort of panel discussion show on YouTube, not a network television show.
Yeah.
And I bring in people who can speak to issues in that vein of what does this particular topic show us about ourselves? What can it teach others to understand about themselves?
Yeah.
So, I use it as subject matter. I use it as a personal tool. So it's really just infused in my identity, my life, my being. So it's hard for it not to be everywhere that in everything I do.
Yeah.
So yeah.
I love that. I think that I wish everybody, you know, would be able to do that. Just care about something so much that it just trickles into every aspect of their life.
I think people come to that eventually. At some point, most people come to a point in their lives where they are looking for something more, something, whether it's more self-knowledge or just more understanding about how to be in the
Yeah.
world.
Yeah.
And that's where that education comes in, or the ability to teach or help someone come to that point. It's something that we all. It's not exclusive to someone with a PhD in psychology.
Yes. Right. So you edited a book titled Seeing in the Dark, Wisdom Works by Black Women in Depth Psychology, in which the contributors and you, all Black women, have this engaging conversation about how concepts of your discipline applies to a broad range of professional and community contexts. Today, because we are specifically focusing on Black History Month, I just wanted to ask what your readers may take away from this as it relates to Black History Month.
I think so much of, besides the celebrations around Black History Month, so often, particularly recently, in more dramatic ways, during Black History Month, we're always led back to what's going on, to quote Marvin Gaye's lyrics. We're always sort of reevaluating how we as Black people are doing in this world during Black History Month. Yeah. And what I love about the sort of diversity of, I call it the little book that could, because it's some books on psychology, it's like, oh man, you need a PhD to read those books. Whereas this book is really tailored for
just an average person.
Everyday people who don't necessarily want to, sludge through all kind of jargon and what have you. And the pieces are so diverse that they speak to a number of different interests and a number of different ways of expressing oneself. I mean, there's poetry, there's sort of memoir, there are, specific sort of research type chapters. And I think they're all, there are some, for example, there are also some sort of, field work experience, like how do you bring this into the world and how does the world speak to you, etc. So the offerings in the book are so diverse that many people can get something from it. So if one chapter is like, there's something else. And the voices, I think, of each woman just come through so loud and clear. It's so unique. Also, sometimes when you read these sort of compilations, everything sounds the same because, publishers or editors kind of edit the personality out of the thing to make it, fit some,
uniform.
Yes. And it is so unique in that each woman's voice is just singing on the page. And I have to give credit to the publisher. The Malibu Press is also a Black woman-owned publishing company.
Oh, wow.
Yes. And, have published some very successful work. And so for us to have the opportunity to publish with them, with the Malibu Press, was very, it was like, I don't want to say miraculous, but it was sort of like, oh, wow, yeah, this is great.
Yeah.
Because I had been looking for a long time in the call for papers. It was, I stated that I wanted this book to be published with a Black woman-owned publishing company.
Yeah.
And in my search, so many of the ones that I remember growing up were all gone. Even if they have been, folded into a larger publishing company, let me find them. And they got I'm thinking Kitchen Table Press and things like that.
Yeah.
So to have had the opportunity to say, oh, wait a minute, the Malibu Press, hello,
Yeah.
I have to also, it wouldn't have been possible without the Malibu Press. So very grateful for that. And again, looking at the whole book all together, I just think the women's voices are just, again, the publisher and the uniqueness of each of those chapters in those women's voices are wonderful. And I don't want to talk about them in the sort of in the distant third person because, we all know each other. We all went to the same graduate program, the same PhD program,
right.
In different departments.
Right. And I think in in the introduction of your book, you kind of spoke about that. I mean, not of your book, of the collaboration.
Yeah. And because that was part of the inspiration is too light a word. I was fed up and I was determined because the more you submit your work for whatever it is, for funding, for publication, you keep hearing no, but at the same time you're like, wait a minute, you told me no, yet here's a book, pretty much the same thing I submitted, and you published it, but a white man wrote it. Okay, I see what's going on. And so I know there's a risk. There's a risk in continuing to expose your original work.
Right. Yeah,
people
that's
will
true.
tell you no, but they'll basically
rebrand it.
They will steal it.
Yeah.
And they will, move along with, on it. And I was tired of that. And I said, we'll have to just figure something else out.
Right.
Because and I figured if I am feeling this way, I'm sure other people are feeling this way. And everybody, once you, get a doctorate, you want your work to be exposed. So I said, well, let me create a call for papers, see who's interested, and let's just get more than me published, right?
Yeah.
And so, there, lots of people who are interested, but, it's a daunting process. And so the ones who were with it. And I think the resonance, the richness of the book as a whole is a testament to just those voices that
Yeah.
You can never say anything is perfect, but the book is a perfect expression, I think.
I would agree as well.
It's I can't, there's no dissatisfaction. You can always read something that you've been involved in and say, oh, I wish. I'm like, no. I mean, and again, the publisher, I was allowed to design the cover. Who does that, right? So I was, as the editor, I was afforded a lot of latitude in standing my ground on some things, and just making sure that it conveyed what it needed to convey. We wanted to present ourselves in a certain way, and I think we did that. And looking at the some of the comments on Amazon and what have you, it is, like I said, it's the little book that could.
Yeah, and I feel like, unfortunately, so much of Black history is kind of not shunned, but kind of put in the back corner.
Right.
And to really understand, I had to take a Africana Studies class in college, and that's when I started to dive deeper into things and question the history that I've been told and stuff, and realize that there was a background going on in every historical event. And sometimes those stories are not being told. And, you know, when I was reading your piece about like Harlem and stuff, there was so much that I didn't really even know until I read this.
Yeah.
You know, and I think it's great like that. Like now I know something new that I didn't know before.
That's great. And I think because my chapter was sort of, you know, not sort of, it took into account history.
Right.
That, you know, that to me isn't sort of an obvious, oh, this relates to Black History Month. In our shift and understanding how other narratives are equally valuable as historical documents. The other chapters that were not necessarily historical chapters are, we have to learn to value all knowledge production as part of our history.
Right.
And we shouldn't just think of one sort of writing as, oh, this is history. Because as we know from back in the 90s, I think this HBO produced a documentary on where various actors were reading the slave narratives. I'm blanking on the name of the project, but firsthand accounts of one's experience are valuable as historical documentation.
Yes.
And so for me, that's part of the reason why I would say, yes, the book Seeing in the Dark is definitely a great addition on the shoulders of many to the Black history.
Just like education
endeavor.
Even. Yeah, just education of things that, you know, these things are out there. They may be a little bit harder to find, unfortunately, but you know these things and you're telling or educating us about it in a way that's interesting and in a way that made me, it was almost like, it was like hindsight. I was like, that makes so much sense, but why did I never piece things together?
That's great. That's great. No, that's wonderful. So, you know, that's all you can ever hope for, I think. I think when, at least I know this is how I work, and I know other writers who work this way, we think it's best not to be preoccupied with the results, like who is going to read this, what's going to happen. You know, you write to serve the content, to serve what you're writing about.
Right.
And then you should be concerned with, oh, so who could I get this to, who might benefit from it, who might enjoy it, but writing with the audience or the results in the back of your mind is a good way to shut yourself down or to compromise what you're doing. So it's great hearing after the fact that when people do read any chapter in the book, that there's something resonant. There's something that you can take away from it. So that's great. I'm glad to hear that. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. So staying with the theme of Black women and the celebration of their contribution to the historical American narrative, I want to know, in your professional opinion, have we reached parity in recognizing their vast catalog of achievements? And I ask this because there seems to be many layers of marginalization here, and the American narrative has not been particularly inclusive to the history of Black women.
Yeah, I agree with that, your observation. And it is still something that we, as a society, that we struggle with, definitely. I think that we still have not reached parity. I think if you listen to someone like Viola Davis talk about her experience she's one of the producers on her latest film, The Woman King.
Oh, yes.
And listening to some of her experiences, a lot of what she has to endure is no different than what a filmmaker like Casey Lemons had to experience back in the 90s when she was producing Eve's Bayou. So these same sorts of issues come up, even though
it's been almost like 30 years.
Thank you. It seems like we may see more projects, or these, as I write in my chapter in Seeing the Dark, these sort of waves or cycles of, oh, look at all this Black content we're seeing, or at least we're seeing content with Black people in it, and then it goes away and we have the same fight, and then we come back. So it's shifting a little because more people are choosing to try to produce their own work. But unless you are self-financing something, as soon as you go to any other company in an attempt to get funding or distribution deal, you're going to come across these questions.
Yeah.
One of the things my students study, there's a book called The Hollywood Jim Crow by a writer named Marianne Eriga, Erigah, and she talks about unbankable Blackness. How studios and production companies feel that Black projects don't make money or won't make money.
Oh.
So again, go back to Casey Lemon. So Eve's Bayou celebrated its 20th anniversary last year in 2002. But in 1997, she was at an event and she was coming up to speak. And as she comes to the microphone, her face, she looks like shell-shocked. And so everybody's like, oh my God, did something bad happen? What happened?
Yeah.
And she said, I'm sorry, I just got a call from my agent who told me that my film was the highest grossing independent film of the year.
Wow.
And people just erupted in applause. So, this is Eve's Bayou. She wrote it, she directed it, no white people in the film.
Yeah.
She had already kind of talked about the struggle of getting it made, getting money to get it made. And so here it is. I think it cost $4 million and it made $17 million.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah, that's 4 times, a little more than 4 times what it cost. And so you would think that the conversation would be over. This unbankable,
right.
Oh, no, Black. But it
yeah,
it's like the default.
It sucks that people see, like, there's a precedence for successful creations. But for some reason, when people bring it up, it's almost like, oh, that's an anomaly.
That's right. That's absolutely right.
And it may be because it might be the only one. It might be an anomaly because it's so far and few between because nobody's given a chance.
That's right. I think you're absolutely right in your observation. And even so, Black Panther 1, that film, it's the biggest grossing film of all time.
Yeah.
Black, white, whatever. So, it's kind of hard to top that. And so it doesn't mean that Black Panther 2 is not successful. As a matter of fact, it seems successful in a different way because a lot of the reviews are talking about how it was so grounded. It was a Marvel superhero film, but it was really grounded and character driven and introducing new characters, a new story, and it did it all so well. And it was still, exciting.
Yeah.
But because it didn't do what Black Panther 1 did, people are like, well, I don't know. It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. And so, Ryan Coogler and Joe Robert Cole, who wrote it, they're Black men. But if you can imagine, you mentioned all these different layers of marginalization. So that's, Kimberly Crenshaw obviously would call that intersectional.
Yes.
Oppression, where Black women experience not just racial oppression, but class oppression, uh, um, economic oppression, all these different layers of oppression. And it's a shame that in 2022, or 2021, whenever the whole production and development process was going on for The Woman King, that Viola Davis had to hear, well, can one of the Agosier trainees be a white girl?
Yeah.
And she's like, no. The Agosier were African women, Black African women, because, they try to talk about, well, South Africa,
Yeah, but that's not in South Africa.
Right, but even if white people in South Africa aren't from South,
Yes,
whatever.
yes.
We're not even, it's just crazy. So that she had to hear that after so many, Roots on television was groundbreaking, and we thought that was going to change things for, television, and it didn't. The Cosby Show was this thing, and we thought that was going to change things. It didn't. So,
yeah, and even though those were all wildly popular,
right?
They're still showing reruns.
That's right. That's right. So obviously, Black subject matter, written, produced, and or starring Black talent, and directed. Don't want to leave directors out. It is bankable. So either you all need some ginkgo biloba because your memories are shot, or you're relying on this excuse so that you can get out of your responsibility to make sure that more than just the white male or white female narrative is told. So there are still layers of marginalization. We haven't met parity yet. There's someone, I forget who's spearheading the effort, but just as in non-entertainment related employment issues, there's something called the transparency clause, or something where you have to be transparent about salary.
Oh, yes, I did hear that.
You can't get away with paying a white male more than this, Black or brown woman, so you have, and you can't get away with paying this white woman more than this Black or brown woman. Right. So this effort for transparency, and the same is happening in, the entertainment, film, and television arena.
Should be.
Because, male directors will get paid more than women directors. Male writers will get paid more than women writers, even if the woman writer has, wildly successful credits. So there's still a long, long way to go. As far as Black History Month, I think I would just stick to my ongoing belief that we have to stop asking. We have to stop asking. If we have the wherewithal to produce something, do it, and then find a way to distribute it. I mean, we even have models for that. I'm thinking of, Melvin Van Peebles, who distributed his first film, Sweet Sweetback. He did that out of his trunk, So we have to get a little more scrappy and stop defining
or waiting
success. Right. Stop waiting and stop defining success by whether, quote unquote, Hollywood says yes to us.
Right.
Because trust me, when you successfully execute your project and get it out there and the public responds to it, they'll come a calling.
Oh, yeah.
Hey, knock. It's like, no. I came to you 2 years ago with this. You told me, no, we need Julia Roberts to play Harriet Tubman. I don't think so. Right. So, yeah, I think for me, that's it. And then that is my personality, though. I don't like asking. I ain't waiting for you. I'm not waiting for nobody.
Well, so, you know what? It got your book published, and
I mean, yeah. So it takes longer. Ava DuVernay has said this. It took her longer because she didn't want to go through those routes of asking other people for anything. So she created her own. She made her movie, her first movie, that got her some attention. She got a little more money and made her second movie, etc. And then she found a way to distribute them without asking for other people to distribute them. And so, it can be done. It takes longer, as she said. It does. I mean, if I were more personable to the power structure, yeah, I'm sure I would be, in a different position than I am. But my peace of mind, maintaining my creative authenticity, and that sounds sort of highfalutin and pie in the sky, but it's important. It's very important.
Right.
It's very important. And where am I going? I don't need to rush and get some, I have nothing but time. Right? That's what life is about. So, yeah. But yes. There's still a long, long way to go to get parity for Black women.
Yes, I agree. But I hope one day all of us can please be equal in some way.
No, absolutely.
But yes, so going on, following along with that discussion, one of the many things you have done is that you played an important role in the script consultant on telling Georgiana's, is that how you say it?
That was the name of the piece that PBS Masterpiece published. Yeah. So
in Sandition, right? Season 2?
Sanditon.
Oh, Sandition. Okay. Yes. Yeah. So the producers of this show said that they saw an opportunity to tell the story of the main character in a more authentic way, right? So, will you help us understand what that meant for you? What that meant for you as a script consultant?
So, again, that was me becoming a script consultant with a long-standing organization, a long-standing corporation like PBS for their Masterpiece series, which I remember watching Masterpiece Theater as a kid on Channel 13 growing up. So again, that was more, Black women just thinking of other Black women. That was another, just like Seeing in the Dark was that. Me getting this job was that. A Black woman who has worked at WGBH, which is the producing company, and has, had many news and information programs with WGBH. Since she was in the company, she knew that they were looking to improve their numbers, just overall corporate-wise. The diversity was somewhat lacking. And, I'm not speaking out of school. This is in print. They've said this publicly. And that's how I found out about it. I got an email from the executive producer of PBS Masterpiece and, met with her, sent her my resume, told her my background. And it really is, one of my friends who is a publicist said, wow, what a perfect pairing. And, it is, I would say, yeah, it's a great opportunity for me because it's right in my pocket. It's literature, it's film. For those listeners who might not know, PBS Masterpiece is primarily, they primarily produce adaptations of quote unquote classical literature. So I don't think they produced any Black literature, so we still got to tackle that because what you call classical literature often means
white.
White from English, right? So, but I've read all those 17th and 18th century white women authors. I've read the Jane Austens and the Charlotte Brontes and but also because I have the background as a television writer and because I teach. I created actually an original course for a college that I taught at for 2 years because they needed to improve their diversity numbers. I taught a college course on race and gender in adaptation so that you had to study the literature and the films that were made based on that literature. So this was like a perfect sort of position
Right.
And I have enjoyed it immensely. Number one, again, things tie together because I teach it. It's important. I consider myself a scholar practitioner, so it's important that I remain actively doing that work because that strengthens my teaching, right? And then the teaching, because as a writer, you are a teacher of sorts. And in this unique position, I have to operate as a teacher in explaining why, this
Yes.
shouldn't be or this should,
Right.
So it was perfect. And I hadn't watched the first season of Sanditon, but I got to review it all and then read what was coming up for season 2 and season 3 because they shot season 2 and 3 back to back, which was great. And not just Sanderson, there are other programs coming up that I've also worked on. So Tom Jones, based on Henry Fielding's 17th century novel, will air sometime in April. I think April 23rd, I think. And Sanderson season 3 will premiere March 17th, I think.
Oh, wow. Nice.
But it's like revisiting all these things I had to read in undergrad, all these, English literature, reading all these novels and things, and then, applying my experience as a TV and screenwriter. And it's really a perfect pairing. I really enjoy it.
Right. And it must be nice to be able to write, like they said, something more authentic, I guess, be able to, I don't know,
Yeah, well, there are two schools of thought. There are some schools of thought that feel like we shouldn't have to still be teaching white people, white organizations, and sometimes I feel that way. But more strongly, I feel if I don't do it, it won't be done.
Right.
Or not that I think I'm saving anything, but I was the one who was asked. So if I say no, the possible outcome is that they won't pick anyone, and it will be left in the hands of a predominantly white writing staff, predominantly white executive ranks. And I was like, I can't do that.
Yeah.
And so I think the other misconception is, so yes, I am the guardian over Black characters' development in these situations, but not only their development, right? Because they have to interact with all the other characters. So I also have to know all of the other characters and advise on all of the other characters and how they would respond or wouldn't behave. Or so that's why it's like not script consultant regarding the Black characters. I'm the script. My screen credit says script consultant for Masterpiece because I have a lot to say about the entire process, the entire thing,
Right.
with a specific focus on this or these Black characters. And the impetus for the company's focus, like most companies, and again, I'm not speaking out of school because this has been published publicly on their website for sure. The George Floyd murder,
Right. Yeah.
shook people up.
Yeah, definitely.
And it did make people reevaluate. Now, there are some companies that have long since dropped all their efforts, and other companies are still at it. And so definitely PBS is still at it. And so as these projects come up, it is interesting to be able to contribute in that way.
Right, and I think it's very important as well.
Yeah, it is because there are many. The ideal is producing my own stuff, and I don't have to appeal to anyone else. But there are so many other things that are still produced by large companies that may not have a lot of diversity. So there are many places to do that work. And so this was an opportunity that, for me, I just said, yeah, this feels like a great work to do. And I can't say that about every opportunity. Some I'm like, yeah, no, I'm not going to do that.
Yeah.
But this was, I felt that this was really
worthwhile.
Timely. Yeah, timely. And I said, yeah, I will enjoy doing this.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah. So, I mean, and when I say enjoy, I don't mean to say that it's not frustrating sometimes. Mm-hmm. But the frustration is part of the joy. It's like, oh, no. I'm going to, say what I have to say about this because no. Right. And again, the reason people tend not to do that is because it's a risk. It's like, oh, if I make somebody mad, am I going to get fired?
Yeah.
But I feel like, you know what? Got to say it. Got to be honest. Got to be,
Yes.
And yeah, so I think when you work with a company that has some deeper, genuine concern, then that makes the experience a little better. And I'm thinking of going back to Sesame Street. Sesame Street premiered when I was in kindergarten. I was 5. And the reason that show was created was because there was this great disparity in education.
Right.
And Sesame Street was about showing all children and helping all children learn. And it was, one of the most diverse programs at the time. And again, that was the same company. It was, PBS. And so, when you look at that kind of legacy, for me, I felt like, yeah, I want to be a part of this legacy because I was a Sesame Street baby, right?
Right.
So, yeah, I just feel like you make you find out what is required. You do your research. Who's the company? Who are the, and then you make your decision. And this was a good decision, I think, and I enjoy it. So I look forward to people seeing Sanditon season 3 and Tom Jones. Tom Jones is a mini. It's 4 episodes, so it's a limited series, so to speak. And there are some other ones coming up, but I don't know if I'm supposed to mention them, so I won't mention them by name. But yeah, there are things coming up. It's hard because this is PBS Masterpiece, but even they have to collaborate with other companies financially to get things done. And so, if even they can't get money, then we know that marginalized groups will also find it hard.
Right.
So, yeah. But yeah, I enjoy it very much. I enjoy being a script consultant. It allows me to do everything that I love. I still love teaching, so I don't want to necessarily not do that. And I love working in film and television, and this serves that as well, and they feed each other. So,
right, that's really wonderful to hear.
Thank you for joining us for this first episode of the 2-part interview with Dr. Johnson. And we would like to ask that you join us again next week when Britney Galicia continues her conversation with Dr. Johnson. This episode was written by Britney Galicia, Charles Johnson, Jesper Diggerman, and me. The JEDI Podcast is executively produced by Charles Johnson and I. It was produced by Frederick Hansen. Our associate producer is Sally Abliner. Our engineer and host for this episode of the podcast is Britney Galicia, and our sound design is by Dwayne Buford. Our technical director is Frederick Hansen. I was the managing editor for this episode. And again, we ask that you join us next week. This was the JEDI Podcast.